That's what I ask today, Lord. Reveal yourself, not only through this word, but also into the hearts of these people. I noticed in Sunday school class that there were many that actually were going ahead of me and applying the message before I could even come to what I needed to come. So I ask you to let them do that again. Let them hear your voice in the Word, and let them come to their conclusion that they need as they hear you speak to them. In your holy name I pray. Amen. We're going to venture into Ruth today. I was going to go Habakkuk because that's what we finished up in Nahum last week. But I just couldn't do that to you again. Those negative prophets, and I need to have a more uplifting story. And this story is so great. How many of you remember who Samuel Johnson was? Anybody know who Samuel Johnson is? Wow. Samuel Johnson was the first man to write a dictionary in the English language. And he was a contemporary of Ben Franklin. And I have a 6-volume set of his life, The Life of Johnson by Boswell. And Johnson was considered the czar of literature in England for a century in the 1700s. He was a very well-known person, and if you do get to ever read his biography, it's really intriguing because he rubs elbows with all these famous men of his day, and was really considered the man to know. Dr. Johnson, actually, as a literary giant, one of the things he did once was he went to a society of literature that didn't believe in the Bible, and he wrote out the story of Ruth and presented it at that society. And they applauded him, thinking it was one of the greatest stories he had ever written. And he goes, "I'm sorry, that's not mine. It comes from the book you don't believe in." That's how powerful this little story is. And so, without any more stall tacking on my part, let's open up the book of Ruth and just flesh out what's the story's about. The first chapter is it's a sorrowful chapter. This book was written at the time of the Judges, and there was no king in the land at that time. You know the stories of the Judges. They would be oppressed. They would go into sin. They would repent. God would send a judge to deliver them. They would have freedom. Then they'd get oppressed by another community around them, and then deliverer would come. For instance, Ehud, the one that applies to this, was you had a King Eglon that oppressed the Israelites, and God sent a left-handed man named Ehud from the tribe of Benjamin, and he killed Eglon, and they had a reprieve from this oppression of the Moabites. And so this story happens during the time of the Judges, and it applies to that very community that was south of Israel, southwest, the Moabites. And so let's just start the story. I hope I can do it justice. But it goes, "Now it came to pass in the days when the judges judged," this is how the Hebrew puts it, "that there was a famine in the land. And a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech." And the first statement we have to see here was Elimelech means, "My God is king." My God is king. And think about that. They had no king, so this man was named by his parents that God would be our king. And so this man shows lack of God being his king, for he took his son, his wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah, and they came into the country of Moab, and they abide there, or they continued there. So what you have right away here is this man acting in the flesh. He's acting, oh, we have famine here. I can't trust God to provide in the house of bread, Bethlehem. I can't trust him to meet our needs. I'm going to take it in my own hands, and I'm going to go down into Moab. This is really all our struggle, isn't it? This is my struggle. When I think that God's not going to provide, I have to do something. It's very fleshly. It's every struggle of every man. So this book really speaks to us. And anyway, what you have to see here now, the names are very important in this book. Naomi means pleasant. J. Vernon McGee nicknames her Mary Sunshine with that name. Okay? Mary Sunshine. She's the one that could look at the glass half full. At one point, she was a very optimistic person. While she was living in Bethlehem, she was an upper. She was an encourager. Her name refers to that. But she named her kids Mahlon and Chilion, and I think that those two names are very important here because one means weakly and the other sickly. Okay, basically. So it's talking, these are fleshly people that are not relying on God, and they are displaying in their actions and in their names that they are weak. They are weak of flesh. Well, it says in verse 3, and Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she left her 2 sons and her. And they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. So they were married for 10 years. And yet they did not produce children. Why? These people are living in the flesh. Why wouldn't they produce children by these women? Because maybe they think famine's in the land, I can't provide for my children. Remember, the magic of children is that if you wait until you can afford to have them, you'll never have them. And these guys have lack of faith. And see, so you have in this first chapter, Warren Wiersbe calls this the sorrowful chapter. And anyway, so Mahlon and Chilion died also, both of them, and the woman was left, and of her 2 sons, of her handmaid, her daughters-in-law. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab how that the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. Wherefore she went forth out of the place where she was, and her 2 daughter-in-laws with her, and they went on the way to return into the land of Judah. And Naomi said unto her 2 daughters-in-law, go return each of you to your mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you, as ye have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant you that ye may find rest, each of you in the house of your husband, your new husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voice and wept. And they said unto her, surely we will return with thee unto thy people. And Naomi said, turn again, my daughters. Why will ye go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Turn again, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, if I should have a husband also tonight, and should also bear sons, would you wait for them till they were grown? Would you stay for them from having husbands? Nay, my daughters, for it grieveth me much for your sakes, that the hand of the Lord is gone out against me. And they lifted up their voice and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clave unto her. I want you to see, before I go on any further, what's going on here. Can you imagine a Jewish mother that knows the Jewish God, Yahweh, sending her 2 daughter-in-laws back to Moab, to the god Chemosh, which sacrificed their children. Can you imagine this? What kind of woman is this? Why would she do this? She is in such a pity party now. Javer and Mickey called her Gloomy Gus at this point. I call her Debbie Downer. Okay? This girl has lost sight of what God can do in her life. She really has. And what she's doing is setting these girls up to never have a salvific experience. Go back to your families. Don't come with me. And you know what she's trying to do also is, if I come back with 2 Moabitess women, the people of my town are going to shun me. They're going to shun you. Because after all, Moab came from Lot. Did you all remember the story? Lot was drunk and his 2 daughters seduced him, and they had incestuous affair, and one named their son Ben-Ami, which means son of my people, or incestuous son. And the other, Moab, in the Hebrew means son of my father. Okay? So basically, when you see a Moabitess, you're thinking incestuous, a person that we don't honor as somebody we even respect. Don't come near my house. You got it? But Ruth said in verse 15, let's go up to verse 15. This is Naomi. It said, "Behold, thy sister-in-law gone back unto her people, and unto their gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law." That's Naomi's last line. And Ruth says that great line. A lot of my wedding, we even had this in. And Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave thee, or return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and whither thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God will be my God." The contrast, it should just break your heart. This girl is coming to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, or of Yahweh, and she's doing it in spite of Naomi. I don't know about you all, but it shudders me to think how many people had to come to Christ in spite of me, of my bad testimony. One time, I got to tell you this happened to me. I was at a kids' camp. I was a youth pastor for First Presbyterian Church in Duluth, right out of seminary. And I was at a kids' camp, and 2 little grade school kids were wandering down the sidewalk there, going from building to building, going from probably towards the dining hall, and I was coming from the dining hall. And I see these 2 little guys, and I walked to them, and I said, "What are you guys doing?" And I was just joking with them. Don't you know that you have to make some big decisions at your age? If you don't make big decisions at your age, you're gonna fall on your face. Let me ask you, do you know Jesus Christ is your Savior? You better go into your, and I'm kind of being facetious and a jerk. Go into your cabin and make it, find Jesus Christ as your Savior and settle it today. And those kids just looked at me with those big eyes, and I smiled and walked away. Years later, I was invited to speak at InterVarsity at the University of Superior campus. And they introduced me, and the guy stands up to introduce me. He goes, "This man doesn't remember me, but I was a little 6th grader, and I was walking up a path. And this man told me that I should accept Jesus Christ and get my paths straightened and aimed for God." And me and Tommy Kilgore went over to the bunk out, and there we bowed our knees and prayed that Jesus Christ would save our lives. You know how foolish I felt? The power of God in spite of me. How Naomi was I like? You know what I mean? I was being a joker, and here God uses it. And here Naomi trying to push this Moabitess back to her people, and this little girl named Ruth goes, "Oh, she's not that little anymore, 10 years of marriage, she's probably in her 30s. I'm going with you, Naomi. Where you lodge, I'm going to lodge. And your people are going to be my people. Even though I'm a Moabitess, I'm going to be the best Jewish Moabitess you ever saw. And your God will be my God. And she goes on, where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also if I ought, but death part thee and me. I'm going to be sticking to you like glue. Okay? You can't get rid of me this easy. So if you look at this passage, there's several things in this first chapter we have to look at. One is the sorrow. We have to look at the love of God punishing these people. There is the love of God, and the love of God does punish. I know I'm a part of God because I don't get scot-free. When I do something wrong, God punishes me. God, that's the same way with you who are believers. We can't act according to our own desires. We have to be acting according to His desires. So the love of God does punish. There's a lesson there. There's also a lesson that there's a pity party here that we have, as Christians, we have to rise above. Listen to this pity party as we finish this chapter. So they two went until they came to Bethlehem, and it came to pass that when they were come to Bethlehem, that all the city was moved about them, and they said, "Is this Naomi? Is this Mary Sunshine? She leaves with a husband and 2 sons, and she returns with one Moabitess daughter-in-law?" And she said unto them, "Call me not Naomi, call me Mara, call me bitter, for the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord had brought me home again empty." If I was Ruth right now, I'd say, "What am I, chopped liver?" You know? "They brought me home empty. Why then call ye me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Lord Almighty hath afflicted me?" And the Hebrew word there is done evil against me. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, which returned out of the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of the barley harvest. Think about this. There's one more lesson that you grab onto. Joe Stoll once said, "You're not the dreams you dream, but you're the choices you make." That's a great line. You're not the dreams you dream, you are the choices you make. Ruth had a choice, and she took it. She made the right choice. Follow God. Follow Naomi. Okay? It's not the dreams. That's her first choice. We're going to see her second choice coming in the second chapter. Now, the first chapter was sorrow. Was the love of God punishing? Was the choice of Ruth to follow God? The second chapter starts out with service. And in this chapter, Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said unto Naomi, "Let me now go to the field and glean ears of corn after him in whose sight I shall find grace." If you have your Bible and you like writing in, this is one you should circle. Ruth's choice is to work, to serve, to find favor, to find grace. Okay? Let's face it. We in America, we search for fame, we search for riches, but seldom do we search for favor. We search for grace. And this girl's looking for grace. And so she goes, that I may find grace. And she said unto her, "Go, my daughter." And she went and came and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And her hap was to light on a part of the field belonging unto Boaz, who was the kindred of Elimelech. We get the word happiness from it. It all is about circumstance. Joy and happiness aren't the same. Happiness is when circumstances run our favor and we get happy. It's a very emotional up and down thing. Joy you can have even in sorrow. You can hold on to joy. And joy provides hope. It's part of the fruit of the Spirit. It is. They're all the same. But anyway, this Hap, I don't want you to think, oh, she was lucky. She flipped the coin. She got into Boaz's field. You got to remember, the love of God may punish, but the love of God also provides. This is the providence of God. I can't tell you how many times in my life that God was just providing. He just provides. Okay? And so here he is, this little Moabite girl, kind of an outcast, and she goes and haps on this field. Now, we need to examine the law here. The law was set up that the corners of the field would remain ungleaned, so that the widows, the orphans, and the strangers could go into that field. The aliens could go in and find some food source in the field. Matter of fact, the law also says if you left a sheaf, a bundle of grain in the field, that's a lot of grain. If you left a sheaf behind you and you remember, oh, don't go back and get it. Let it for the poor, the orphan, the widow, the stranger. That's theirs. So this is really important. She is now going on those corners of the field and gleaning with the rest of the party of the gleaners, trailing the gleaners. But it's very important that we realize she's in the right field. She's in Boaz's field. Now I can't go any further without saying this. Boaz's name in Hebrew means strong or strength. It was one of the names of the pillars in the temple of Solomon. It was one of the keystone pillars. They wanted a pillar that was going to hold up the portico. That's the pillar you saw as you came into the temple, was Boaz. And so there it is. It was strong. Now contrast that. Her first husband, Mahlon, was a weakling. But Boaz was a strong person. A weakling giving into his flesh. Boaz is a man that's strong in the Lord. And you read this man, and I tell you, he's my hero in this book. I think the world of Boaz. And so as we read this man, you see what a life of a man who gives over his life to be totally devoted to Jesus Christ, totally devoted to Yahweh in Old Testament terms. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said unto the reapers, the Lord be with you. And they answered him, the Lord bless thee. And you can see he comes in, and all his reapers are standing around. They cheer him as he comes in. The Lord be with you. The Lord be with you. They love their boss. It's very seldom I've had good bosses, but this is really cool that you have a boss that hey, Boaz is back in the field. And he's not one of the guys that just rolls up his hands. He's doing the work with them. He's gleaning with them. He's a great boss. And then said Boaz unto his servant that was set over the reapers, whose maiden or whose damsel is this? Who's that girl? Who's that woman? Javer and McGee says the Hebrew translation here is, who's that baby? Who's that fox? Okay? There was something about this Moab, and I told my wife, I said, I go through, Hollywood pictures seeing who would fill this role. I can't find a Ruth. They just don't have the character. They don't have the virtue. They just don't have that type of woman that could play the part. I told my wife, I said, when you were younger, you could be the part. You could have played the part. You had that character. I earned some points there, right? But anyway, the point is that she was not unnoticed. There was something about her that set her off. And so Boaz comes up to her, and he said, and the servant that was set over the reapers answered and said, it is the Moabitish damsel that came back with Naomi out of the country of Moab. And she said, I pray you, let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came, and hath continued even from the morning until now, that she tarried just a little in the house. And basically, he's saying, this girl can work. This girl has been in the field all this time, gathering the tidbits off the ground. And you got to imagine, some of that is just little grains of corn that they're finding, but they're grains of wheat that they're finding, or barley they're finding. But she's gathering them. My mom was like this. We used to go blueberry picking, and my mom was like a machine. It was incredible. I would have a little cup of blueberries, and my mom would have a gallon pail done. And Ruth is like my mom in that sense. She was a hard worker. Then said Boaz unto Ruth, meeting. They're all face to face here now. Hearest thou not, my daughter? Go not to glean in another field. Don't listen to anybody telling you to go glean in another field. Neither go from hence, but abide here fast by my maidens. Let thine eyes be on the field that they do reap, and go thou after them. And I have not charged the young. Have I not charged the young man that they shall not touch you? You're out of bounds. And so now not only does God provide, God now provided a provider that protects. I've told these guys, my foremen, they're not to touch you. The young men that are gleaning, to stay away from you. And he said, and then he goes, and when thou art athirst, go unto the vessels and drink of that which the young men have drawn. Okay, there may have been some kind of stigma. Moabites, you don't drink from your lips don't touch our vessels. But he says, you drink. You're a good worker. You're a good woman. And then he goes, and she fell on her face and bowed herself to the ground and said unto him, why have I found grace? Circle it again. She sought it, and she found it. Why have I found grace in thine eyes, that thou shouldest take knowledge of me, seeing I'm an alien? I got to tell you, that's you and me. I was an alien. We're Gentiles, for Pete's sake. We're goyim. I was an alien. I was not in the covenant. I didn't have any access to God. But my Redeemer came. And he died for me. And he gave me grace. This is such a great scene. This such a great verse, 2:10. And 2:11, Boaz responds and said unto her, it hath fully been showed unto me all that thou hast done unto thy mother-in-law since the death of thine husband, and how thou hast left thy father and thy mother in the land of thy nativity, and art come unto a people which thou knewest not hereto. The Lord recompense thy work, and a full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. Yeah. He gets it. He heard about it. He heard that saying, thy people shall be my people, and thy God shall be my God. You're welcome here, girl. You go, girl. Matter of fact, that verse 12, Warren Wiersbe, I listened to a little bit of Warren Wiersbe on Ruth this week, and Warren Wiersbe saw J. Oswald Smith. How many know who J. Oswald Smith is? J. Oswald Smith was a great missionary and a great pastor in Toronto, and was one of Warren Wiersbe's heroes. And Warren Wiersbe had a chance to meet him and have him sign his Bible. Warren said he signed his Bible. You could see it three blocks down. He signed this great big name in his Bible. But he put this verse, 2:12, in there. And Warren said, I had to sneak back where nobody was watching me because I didn't know what the verse said. So he went back there, and he said, what an incredible verse 2:12 is, the Lord recompense thy work. Pay you back for thy work, and a full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. If we trust God, and if we believe in him, I have to tell you, God is going to repay that. He's going to repay that. It may not be in dollar signs. It may not be the way we think it's going to be, but it's going to be a great blessing. It's going to be one of those things where maybe you don't have a gift to share the gospel, but you're faithful in pursuing, studying about apologetics and giving out your faith. God's going to say, I'm going to give you some open doors. I'm going to let you walk through those doors and have some success in that area. Hey, it may not be, you might be pursuing something like music, like the Shays do. And you may say, oh, I'm just going to school, I'm just learning how. And God's going to say, no, I'm going to have you play for kings. I'm going to have you play for important people. I'm going to have you maybe a song leader for a Billy Graham type. You just put your hand and trust under my wing. I will protect. My love will protect and provide. Okay, so these two chapters come to us, and we see it in 13. Then she said, let me find favor in thy sight. There it is again, grace. For that thou hast comforted me, and for thou hast spoken friendly unto thine handmaid. Though I be not like unto one of thine handmaidens. I'm not Jewish. You have been so kind to me. And the provision keeps going, and Boaz said unto her, at mealtime come thou hither, and eat of the bread, and dip thy morsel in the vinegar. And she sat beside the reapers, and she reached her parched corn, and she did eat, and was sufficed, and left. And when she was risen up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and reproach her not. Let the sheaves they have, let her come and glean where the sheaves are. And he says, and let fall also some of the handfuls of purpose for her. Purposely put some handfuls. Can you imagine her coming after the men, and there's little pockets of grain like this laying on the ground? Handfuls of purpose. Let her have some handfuls of purpose. And leave them, that she may glean them and rebuke her not. So she gleaned in the fields. I'm in verse 17 of chapter 2. So she gleaned in the field until even, and beat out that she had gleaned. And it was about an ephah of barley. Now, I don't really know what an ephah is, okay? I know one verse, and I had a friend of mine sign my Bible. It was Exodus 16:36. And I thought, oh, this is going to be an inspiration. An ephah is 1/16 of a barley, or something like 1/10 of a barley. I go, oh, that's really helpful. That's a great, inspiring verse. But this was a good day's wage that she came home to her mother-in-law and brought that so that they could eat. And you think about it, what a blessing. And now as we come to the close of this chapter 2, I got to see how much I got. And she took it up and went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and she brought forth and gave to her, and she was reserved after she was sufficed. And her mother-in-law said unto her, where hast thou gleaned today? See, this. If you want some fun in this book, just underline all the question marks. Remember how we said in Sunday school class last week, questions are important. Where did you glean today that you got all this? This was awesome. And she said, and where wroughtest thou? Where did you work? Blessed be he that did take knowledge of thee. And she showed her mother-in-law with whom she had wrought, and said, the man's name with whom I wrought today is Boaz. And Naomi said unto her daughter-in-law, blessed be he of the Lord, who hath not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead. And Naomi said unto her, the man is near kin of us, one of our next kinsmen. Wow. And Ruth the Moabite said, he said unto me also, thou shalt keep fast by my young men until they have ended all my harvest. And Naomi, that means for weeks I'm going to have this intake. And Naomi said unto Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter, that thou go out with his maidens, that they meet thee not in any other field. So she kept fast by the maidens of Boaz, to glean unto the end of barley harvest and of wheat harvest, and dwelt with her mother-in-law. Wow. So, here's the 2 chapters. Chapter 1, sorrowful. God's love punished. It was all about punishing. The choice that she made, whither thou goest, I will go. Whither thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people. Thy God will be my God. Where they bury you, I will be buried. I'm not going to leave you. That's a great decision. Her choice in this chapter, I'm not sitting here, mother-in-law, and just wilt. We need food. I'm going to harvest. And here's the choice. Don't lose this. The choice is, may I find favor. I need to find favor. As a Moabitess, if she would have just sat and been milking the thing, she would never have found favor because she's a Moabitess. But I'm going to find favor. I'm going to do it. I'm going to see the Lord provide, and I'm going to find God's favor in my life. And this is a good lesson for all of us. You don't find favor sitting on your butt. You find favor by getting shoes on and gloves on and going out working. You find there's where you're going to find God's favor. And I've told this story before. When I became a mailman, I was always depressed as a pastor because there's no energy. You don't have any exercise. You're just reading, developing a pot belly, and you're angry. You just get angry because of all this endorphins built up. I became a mailman. First day on the job, all this camaraderie of fellow workers working hard. We got to get that mail out. We're on the same page. That was like day and night. And now I have this mission field where before, as a pastor, there's times when I worked as a pastor in Michigan, my brother, Bob, sat across the desk from me once. He was the assistant pastor. I was a youth pastor. And he said, Dick, you know any unsaved people? I go, no, I don't know any unsaved people. He goes, neither do I. We need to get out of here. We need to work. We need to be outside. And I started my basketball ministry and had inner city kids. He went and joined the fire department so he could minister to unsaved people on the job. Okay? And for me as a mailman, I'm always bumping into people and talking about the Lord. It's a natural manure of my job. I'm a people person. And so I'm out there loving them. Okay? And so the object here now is the love of God provided. There was a choice. She made a choice to keep moving and find grace, find favor. Chapter 3. We go from sorrow to service, and Worsby's next outline is submission. And submission, he said, Ruth is in waiting here, submitting to her mother-in-law. And really, her choice is obedience. I have to obey Debbie Downer for once. I'm going to obey this woman. But the woman had, her faith revitalized Naomi. And when she found out that we have a kinsman, Naomi went, let's see what the law says about this. Kinsman. And she realized what has to happen. So let me do chapter 3, and I'll explain what's going on here in a little bit. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said unto her, My daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well with thee? Remember the last time she sought rest for him? In chapter 1, she asked the daughter-in-laws to go home so they may find rest in their false god. Now she's saying, my daughter-in-law, me, I find rest for thee. And she said, my daughter-in-law, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well with thee? And verse 2, and now is not Boaz of our kindred, with whose maidens thou wast? Behold, he winnoweth barley tonight in the threshing floor. How did she know that? Well, when you have crops, you can't just stack them up and leave them there because the cows will wander in there. The animals, wild animals, the birds will go in there. You got to act while the sun shines. You got to make hay while the sun shines. And so he's over there. She knew he'd be at the threshing floor with all the other men. They're threshing now. There's a key thing here, and so she says, and now is not Boaz of our kindred, with whose maidens thou wast? Behold, he winnoweth barley tonight in the threshing floor. Wash thyself, therefore, and anoint thee, and put on thy raiment, and let thee down to the floor. And McGee said, told her to put perfume. That's in one of his notations. He says, she put on midnight at Moab. McGee, such a character. But you doll yourself up. Take off your widow's garment, this is what McGee said, and put on your best party dress. You make this guy go down on his knees for this girl. And so he tells her to wash, and then she says, and get thee down to the floor. Okay, wait a second. When you thresh wheat in the ancient Near East, the threshing floor is supposed to be on the top of the hill. Why is she going down to the threshing floor? You remember Gideon? This was the same thing that happened with Gideon. Gideon was threshing down in the valley rather than up on the hill. Why? Because the oppressors, if they saw him threshing on the hill, the oppressors would seize the grain, whoever was oppressing them at the time. So evidently, even though they owned their own land and they were able, there was a threat of an oppressor being able to see them from a distance threshing on top of a hill. So they went down where the hills would hide them. And so they threshed the floor there, and he told her to go down to the floor, and make not thyself known unto the man until he shall have done eating and drinking. And it shall be when he lieth down that thou shalt mark the place where he shall lie, and thou shalt go in and uncover his feet and lay thee down, and he will tell thee what thou shalt do. And she said unto her, all that thou sayest unto me, I will do. There's her choice. I'm going to obey you. Now let me make this statement. If Hollywood did this, there would have been a very steamy scene here. Okay? The threshing floor, what they did was they would lie with their feet at the stack of wheat, and their feet would come out. I mean, they'd lie with their head at the stack of wheat, and their feet would come out, and their feet would be covered. And you could come on the out circle of the spokes of this circle, and you could uncover the man's legs, and he'd wake up. That's what she is basically doing. Was she trying to seduce him? In a little way she is, but not. I don't know if sexually. She's trying to seduce him to be the kinsman for her. So she comes in there, and she's dolled up. And she uncovers his feet while he's sleeping. And she went down onto the floor and did according to all her mother-in-law bade her. Verse 7. And when Boaz had eaten and drink, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down, and at the end of the heap of corn, and she came softly and uncovered his feet and laid her down. And it came to pass at midnight that the man was afraid and turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, who art thou? And she answered, I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt. And that's a very unfortunate translation. It can mean skirt, but it plays on something earlier in the book. Kanaf in the Hebrew means wing or shoulder. Wing. Spread your wing over me. Just like God's wing was to be spread over in verse 12 of chapter 2. Ruth is saying, spread your wing over me. Take care of me. Be my kinsman. That's basically over thine handmaid, and thou, for thou art my near kinsman. Remember in Psalm 91:4 where it says, the Lord there shall hide thee under the shadow of thy wing. The Lord will take care of you and put you under the shadow of thy wing. This is the thing that's happening here. This is a sign where she's saying, I want you to be my kinsman. I want you to overshadow me and take care of me. And he said, Blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter, for thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning, inasmuch as thou followest not young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, fear not. I will do to thee all that thou requirest, for all the city of my people doth know that thou art a virtuous woman. Two things here. Number one, Boaz isn't that young, is he? She may be in her 30s. He may be in his 50s or 40s. Okay? And the other thing he says here, that thou art a virtuous woman. That's a cool word in the Hebrew. Kail means ability, healthy, strong, moral worth, and even rich. Now, don't miss this. We have a tendency to go, Ruth was poor. She had nothing. She was gleaning in a field because she was poor. But her husband had a field, and in the poverty, he sold it probably, so she became poor. But you know, after 70 years, the year of Jubilee would give the field back to her. So now someone owns the field that will, if someone bought the price of the field back, could redeem the field back to Ruth. And all of a sudden, that person could be doubly wealthy. Because not only does Ruth, it's not like a man with a family already is going to be able to get it back at Jubilee. This is a widow that has no children. So if you marry her, your children will inherit her field with your field. You got what's going on here? She has a potential of wealth, just as you and I do. I said in the marriage seminar thing that we did this for Sunday school class, you look at your mate, you look at not that it's a complete statue like the statue of David. That's not what you get. eHarmony.com doesn't give you the perfect match. There's no such thing as Mr. Right out there. You can only be Mr. Right. You can't find Mrs. Right or Mrs. Right, Mr. Right. There's only Mr. Wrong and Mrs. Wrong. But when you get married to someone, you get married not to a complete statue. You get married to a hunk of great marble. You have a potential to carve into a Christ-like statue, an image of God. And that's what we're after here. And Ruth was the potential of being wealthy. As you and I have a potential in the Lord to be so Christ-like that we could do great exploits for Him. That's what God sees in us. He sees in us an image of God that has a potential to be like Jesus if we let Jesus be with us. So anyway, he says she's a virtuous woman. And now it is true that I am thy near kinsman, howbeit, I hate to break your heart, there is a kinsman nearer than I. Tarry this night, and it shall be in the morning, that if he will perform it unto thee the part of a kinsman, well, let him do the kinsman's part. But if he will not do the part of the kinsman to thee, then will I do the part of a kinsman to thee. As the Lord liveth, lie down until morning. And she lay at his feet until the morning, and she rose up before one could know another. And that's a cool phrase in the Hebrew. One could know even his best friend. One could know his friend. It was a dark out enough that you couldn't recognize your friend from a distance. And he said, let it be known, not known, that a woman came unto the floor. And he said, bring the veil that thou hast upon thee, and hold it. And when she held it, he measured 6 measures of barley and laid it on her. And she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, and listen to this mother-in-law, "Who are you?" She knew who she was. She's Ruth. Why did she say that? Who art thou? Who are you? Are you Ruth, the wife of Mahlon? Or are you Ruth, the engaged to Boaz? Are you Ruth, Mrs. Boaz? She wanted to know if thumbs up happened. And she told her all that the man had done to her, verse 16, verse 17. And she said, "These 6 measures of barley gave he me, for he said to me, go not empty unto thy mother-in-law. Then said she, sit still, my daughter, until thou know how the matter will fall. For the man will not be at rest." The Hebrew word there is, he won't be quiet until he had finished the thing this day. And can you imagine him talking with this fellow? I got to do this. I can't let, we got to strike when the iron stops. I got to get this girl. Shoot, we got to get this settled. We got to go. So let's go. In chapter 1, it was sorrow. They disobeyed God. The love of God punished. Ruth had a choice. My choice is to follow God. Chapter 2 is service. The love of God provided and protect. Ruth had a choice. I'm not going to sit on my hind end any longer. I'm going in and I'm going to find favor by working. Okay? Chapter 3 is submission. Submission. The kinsman redeemer's out there. The mother-in-law said, here's the plan. Here's how we're going to do it. And Ruth's choice, I'm going to obey. And God's love, the love at that point is promising. God is promising something here. And we have to grab God's promises. Chapter 4 is a shorter chapter, so bear with me. I'm sorry I'm taking so long, but I love this book. I love this book to death. The love of God promotes is this chapter. And Worsby's last one is satisfaction, and Ruth's wedding. And here's choice 4. I do. Basically. That's the choice. It's a no-brainer at this point. Then went Boaz up to the gate and sat him down there, and behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spake came by, unto whom he said, Ho, such a one, turn aside, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. The gate in the city was what we would call City Hall, the courthouse. You would go to the gate of the city to do your judging. You would do, and they would honor, they make their judgment. They would have the people assemble, and you would have 10 or so vote on it, and you would judge your matters at the gate of the city. Matter of fact, during the time of David, Absalom set up at the gate. And Absalom was taking all the people's matters, and he would settle them instead of going to the king. So the gate was a really hot spot for court cases. And at this point in the court case, he summons 10 guys along, and he sees that guy walking by and goes, Hey, you there, come over here. And he said, what's this all about? He sits him down, and he starts the court proceedings. And so, he took the 10 elders in verse 3, and he said unto the kinsman, Naomi that is come again out of the country of Moab, selleth a parcel of land which was our brother's Elimelech's. And I thought to advertise thee, saying, Buy it before the inhabitants and before the elders of my people. If thou wilt redeem it, redeem it. But if thou wilt not redeem it, then tell me, that I may know, for there is none to redeem it beside thee, and I am after thee. And he said, and the man said, I'll redeem it. So he understood. He gets double property. Naomi's not going to have any more kids. It's a dead end here. It's my property now. I'll double my property here. He understood that. But he forgot about one little point here. Then said Boaz, What day thou buyest the field of the hand of Naomi, thou must buy it also of Ruth the Moabitess. the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. And that's that Levirate marriage of Zelophehad in Deuteronomy, in the last chapter of Leviticus, I think it was, that Deuteronomy 24, that when you would always have the plots of land go back to their families. If the brother did not have offspring, you had to provide offspring for her by marrying. Jesus even refers this to that one thing, if there were 7 men and they all died, whose wife would she be, that thing. But the property would go back to for sale if you didn't have an offspring. So the brother was supposed to provide an offspring. Even before the law, this was a law, because Judah promised Tamar that he was going to give her one of his sons. And all of his sons basically died, and she couldn't have it. And the youngest one, he allowed to marry off someone. And you go into the rabbinics, the midrash, they say you can't do that. The young boy can't wait for the old woman, and it gets all complicated. But as soon as he said you have to provide for Moab, now this man going, humma, wait a second. And the kinsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar. The Hebrew word is cause to ruin my own inheritance. Redeem thou my right to thyself, for I cannot redeem it. And the concept here is this. I'm not going to marry a Moabitess and bring a strange woman and strange practices in my house. That would ruin my inheritance. I'm not doing that. You can have her. You can have the property. Wow. Evidently the guy never saw Ruth. She was a fox, remember? Anyway, and then now this was the manner, the form of time in Israel concerning the redeeming and concerning changing. For to confirm all things, a man plucked off his shoe, and this is in Deuteronomy 25:8, and gave it to the neighbor, and this was a testimony to Israel. Actually, they would spit in his face at this time, and there would be shamed. He would be considered the man without a shoe because he wouldn't fulfill his promise to his brother, his kin. So it was a shaming process. At this point, they didn't spit in his face. They just saw it as a transaction. When I was in Israel and at the Temple of the Scroll, I remember seeing a document, ancient document there. I can't remember if it was on leather or on clay, but right next to it was a sandal, because it was one of these changes where you had to drop your shoe and leave it with the document, file it in the court. Can you imagine the big filing court cases with all these pots? Actually, they put them in pots when they're done with them, and that's how they filed them. Anyway, so therefore the kinsman said unto Boaz, buy it for thee. So he drew off his shoe. And Boaz said unto the elders and unto the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Kilion's and Mahlon's of the hand of Ruth. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, this is the only reason we know she was the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of his place. And ye are witnesses this day. And all the people were in the gate, and all the elders said, we are witnesses. The Lord make the woman that is come unto thine house, like Rachel and like Leah, which two did build the house. We have 12 kids. We hope she'll have 12 kids, basically. And let the house be like the house of Pharez, whom Tamar bare unto Judah, of the seed which the woman shall give thee of this young woman, which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman. So we have the scene where he's going to marry her, and they're blessing him. What's really incredible about this is that what comes after here. This is, that property would one day be the property where sheep would be raised by Jesse, and a little shepherd boy named David would be on that property. This little piece of land would someday be owned by David. This is incredible. The Lord promotes, the Lord rewards. Let's just read it and I'll finish. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife, and when he went in unto her, the Lord gave her conception. She bare a son. And the woman said unto Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, which hath not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel. And he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, and of a nourisher of thine old age. For thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, hath borne him. And Naomi took the child and laid it to her bosom and became a nurse unto it. And the women, her neighbors, gave it to a name, saying, There is a son born to Naomi, and they call his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. And that's how this book ends. It ends, it's funny when you look at it, it ends in sorrow, but it ends in joy. A couple of years ago, I'm going to close with this. A couple of years ago, I was in a dentist's office, and I was talking about my grandchildren, having my son has 4, and I was talking with my nurse anesthetist, and she was saying how she, at this point in her life, was so ecstatic because her son's getting married. She thought he'd never get married. He's getting married, and they're getting married out in Colorado, and she goes, I can't wait to be a grandma. I've looked forward all my life to have that joy again. During their honeymoon, they were motorcycling, and a car head-on killed them both. Anne grieves, unbelievable. That's where Naomi was. You know, I saw Anne a couple of years ago after this fact. Matter of fact, I have a greeting card that I sent to Anne, my only sympathy card. It's called On the Trail of a Broken Heart. And I gave it to her. She has the original. I drew it for her. And a couple of years ago, I bumped into her, and I told her I'm selling them over there. And she went over and bought all of them. I think but she told me, she said, you know, God has taken away that, but he hasn't taken my desire for him. Okay? We have to realize something in this story that is not really clear for us, but we need to see it. Boaz was a giver. He gave Ruth everything, right? And Ruth could have been satisfied just gleaning in the fields. She could have been satisfied with the life he was providing for her by the gifts of the... But Ruth wasn't. Ruth only would be satisfied with the giver. You and I sometimes just get satisfied with the gifts. We get satisfied with what God provides for us. But we should go really strong to the hoop for him. I'm not satisfied until God is my kinsman. So Jesus is my kinsman. I'm not satisfied until when I have devotions, he speaks to me, and I have intimacy with my God. Don't be satisfied with the gifts. Remember when Abraham was told to offer up Isaac? He had in Isaac the Messiah, the one that was going to save the world of the sins. And God goes, I want that boy sacrificed. And Abraham started to do it. He went through with it. He was going to kill his own son. The author of Hebrews said it only made sense that God would have to raise him up from the dead. But the option was this. Do you love me for the gift or for the giver? Who are you going to opt for, Abraham? And Abraham opted for God. He opted, I won't settle for gifts. I want the giver. And in this story, we have a kinsman redeemer that Ruth went strong to the hoop to get. Where am I? Whither thou goest, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Our Heavenly Father, I just ask that this book, I read it. It was all from you. It's your story. And we are all parts and pages of it. Some of us are in sorrow. We're kind of bitter at the Lord. Other of us are seeing how he provides, and we're seeing the protection. Other of us are in the romance with him. asking him to be our kinsman. Lord, I just ask that wherever these people are, that tonight and for the rest of their lives, they'll go hard to the hoop for you. Don't let them settle for the gifts. In your holy name I pray.